Discover the amazing courage of a nanny who changed the lives of Millionaire CEO's twins forever. Elise stood at the entrance of the sprawling mansion, her heart racing. The flawless marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, echoing the isolated grandeur that filled the air. The weight of her new role as a nanny to CEO Mark Henderson's twins, Clara and Jake, felt monumental. She ached for their acceptance. Raised by hardworking single parents, Elise had learned the value of love and dedication. Now, surrounded by wealth, she couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. The judgmental whispers of the elite neighbors felt like icy fingers on her back, reminding her she was just a nanny. But hope blossomed as she tentatively entered the children's world. Clara, with her spirited laughter, and Jake, whose shy smile melted Elise's heart, unlocked the door to their lives as weeks passed. They shared innocent stories while building pillow forts, hiding from the shadows of unreachable expectations. Yet, with every giggle, Elise could feel an undercurrent of pressure. The twins lived an existence overshadowed by their father's empire, longing for connection in an empty house that echoed with silence. One rainy afternoon, as raindrops tapped rhythmically against the windows, Elise sensed Jake's frustration as he poured his heart out while drawing a letter to his father. "Can you help me?" he asked, eyes wide with earnest hope. Together, they crafted a simple, heartfelt message adorned with childlike drawings. But when Mark brushed off the letter like an afterthought during a work call, Elise witnessed Jake's innocent spirit dulling his heartbreaking. Tears pricked Elise's eyes, and she felt a frustration boiling in her chest. How could wealth overshadow love? Would he ever see their struggles? Before Elise could gather her thoughts, fate kicked in. A scandal erupted, rocking Mark's company to the core. Whispers filled the neighborhood, turning brunches into discussions of catastrophe. The world they knew crumbled, and the looming judgment from neighbors threatened to close in. Yet, as crises brewed, Elise felt the stirring of purpose. She rallied the community, organizing a fundraiser, putting aside her doubts and fears. Old friends and even some wealthy skeptics contributed proof that hope, not wealth, was the currency that mattered most. The day of the event approached, and from the shadows of the sprawling lawn, Elise could feel Clara and Jake's worries melding with her own insecurities. Would she be enough? Would they ever see her not just as help, but as family? Just as she was about to stare into those questions, serenity fell. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Clara and Jake opened up, revealing their longings for a connection that money could never fulfill. That moment ignited a flame within Elise. She realized that love and not prestige held the power to mend broken spirits. She felt bolstered, ready to break through the walls formed from their father's expectations. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Elise stepped onto the fundraiser stage, the crowd's eyes bored into her. The spotlight felt intense, but beneath it, she held the twins' truth, a truth that could penetrate even the barriers built by wealth and success. Would Mark finally recognize the invaluable role she played in their lives? As she scanned the audience, her heart thundered with hope and fear. The secrets lurking beneath their polished lives threatened to explode. Would she be brave enough to reveal the family's struggles, or would they remain hidden forever? The air was thick with unspoken questions. All eyes were on her, and the moment hung in the balance, waiting for an answer. Elise stood at the center of the stage, her palms slick with nervous sweat, the crowd's anticipation crackling in the air like static. She could feel her heart thumping loudly enough to drown out the whispers of the gathering. Each face watching her held a story, their own triumphs, fears, and insecurities, all masked behind designer clothes and polished smiles. But here she was, ready to strip away the veils, exposing the raw truth of a family on the brink. Taking a deep breath, She opened her mouth to speak. Words spilled forth in a rush, fueled by the gravity of the moment. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice slightly wavering yet growing steadier with every sentence. "This fundraiser isn't just about raising money. It's about understanding our neighbors. Sometimes it's easy to forget that, even in luxury, there can be loneliness." She glanced at Clara and Jake, who sat close by, eyes wide, almost glowing with hope. Their expressions gave her strength, and she pressed on. "Mark, the twins' father, has worked incredibly hard for everything he has built. But sometimes, in the hustle and bustle, it's easy to overlook the little things. Things like a kind word, a hug, or just being there." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, the silence was heavy. Would she break? She felt vulnerable, but more alive than ever. Clara and Jake need their father, not just his accolades or his wealth. They need love, they need connection. Her words echoed through the crowd, and she could feel the tension shift. They weren't just listening, they were starting to feel. She noticed a few heads nodding, a flicker of understanding crossing their faces. Families like theirs were often bound by invisible chains of expectation. Elise spoke of the twins' struggles, of how they had shared their dreams amidst shadows of doubt. She shared their laughter, their tears, and their longing for something real. After a powerful pause, she choked back tears as she addressed the audience again. "Now is the perfect moment for us all to come together. Not in judgment, but in unity. Because everyone deserves love and understanding, regardless of their status." The crowd erupted into applause, and jolts of encouragement flooded her like a warm embrace. Elise felt invigorated, as if each clap revived her resolve. But she wasn't done. Mark's expression shifted as he stepped forward, eyes wide with realization, catching glimmers of the truths she unveiled. "Thank you for your words," Mark finally said, his voice low but carrying an undeniable weight. He turned to the crowd, vulnerability coloring his tone. "I've often judged my success by the money I've made, but I think I've lost sight of what truly matters." His gaze met Elise's, and she could feel the shift in his heart. In that charged moment, something clicked. But just as the tides seemed to turn, a stern voice rang out from the back of the room. "You can't undo the damage, Mark. Money might not replace love, but what about your responsibilities?" The tension surged, threatening to unravel everything Elise had built in that short time. Elise's heart raced. Would Mark's moment of vulnerability be drowned out by criticism? Would they fall back into their comfort zones, or could this really be a turning point? She clenched her fists, ready to fight for the truth she had uncovered. The air crackled with uncertainty. All eyes shifted not just to her, but to Mark, waiting with bated breath. Would he respond with fear, or would he step up, finally embracing the love his children yearned for? As the atmosphere thickened with tension, Elise felt a mix of hope and dread swirl around her. Would they forge a new path together, or would shadows continue to loom over their lives? The moment teetered on the edge of transformation. Mark stood at the forefront, his brow furrowed in concentration. The stark contrast of his tailored suit and the vulnerability in his voice made the moment feel even heavier. He had come so far but was now teetering on the brink of a crucial decision. The murmurs in the back seemed to escalate, impatience thick in the air like humidity before a storm. "Look, I know my choices haven't always been the best," he started, his gaze darting to the side as if searching his heart for the right words. "But I want to try. I want the kids to know me as their father, not just a paycheck." The audience's response was mixed. Some nodded in support, clearly moved, while others remained skeptical, arms crossed tight. Elise's pulse raced. She could feel the delicate balance shift, like a pendulum ready to swing either way. "Then do it," a voice from the crowd interrupted, this time softer yet firm. It was a woman with piercing eyes. "Don't just say it. Show them. Be present." Elise felt the warmth of hope rise within her. Maybe this was how it would start, people encouraging real change instead of retreating back to their complacency. She stepped forward, taking advantage of the shift. "Mark, if you truly want this, then let us show them what it means to have a father who is there, not just in body but heart." Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He seemed to absorb her words, thinking them through like a lifeline. But I'm terrified I've messed up so much. What if I fail them again? Failing is part of being human, Mark, Elise replied, letting her voice settle into a comforting tone. What matters is what you do from here on out. Your willingness to embrace your pain and let them in will create the connection they need. The crowd grew quiet once again, the tension replaced by something softer, more profound. Mark took a breath, and the air in the room felt charged, as though they all could sense that this moment could spark real change. I want to try, truly try, he finally said, determination creeping into his voice. Clara, Jake, I promise to show up for you both, however imperfectly, with all my flaws. Jake's eyes glimmered with fresh tears, and Clara leaned over him, her hand finding his, squeezing tight as if to tether their hopes together. Mark's words were tentative, but they were also filled with something Elise realized they had been craving for too long, a genuine promise of love and dedication. But just as warmth began to spread through the room, a familiar face entered through the door, hurried and flustered. It was Celine, Mark's high-powered business partner. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, a striking contrast to the tender atmosphere they had created. What are you doing here? This isn't business time. Mark snapped, irritation flaring up like a match striking fire. Panic surged through Elise. Would Celine's presence bring chaos back into their fragile moment? Celine positioned herself, all authority. I'm here to remind you that you've got obligations. We can't afford distractions, Mark. She gestured toward the expectant audience, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. Mark's expression hardened. A ripple of concern washed across the audience. Elise felt the walls closing in again, apprehension filling the space where vulnerability had just flourished. As tension wrapped its familiar fingers around them, Elise felt an urgency bubbling up. It was clear, the battle between personal connection and corporate demands was about to unfold right in front of them. Would Mark rally against the pressures of his world and forge this authentic path toward being the father Clara and Jake needed? Or would he be swayed back into the cold clutches of expectations and responsibilities he had fought so hard to escape? The room seemed to hold its breath, everyone yearning for the answer. Who would Mark choose to be, father or CEO? And could any of them truly transform in the face of such trials? Mark's heart raced, the weight of Celine's interruption pushing against his resolve. He could feel Clara and Jake's gazes, steady yet full of unease. The cheers of support that had just washed over him now seemed to dissipate, leaving a silence that was heavy with doubt. Obligations? He repeated incredulously, a frown furrowing his brow. What about the obligation of being a father? To my kids? He gestured toward Clara and Jake, who were silently watching the drama unfold. Their faces wore a mix of hope and fear, a reflection of his own inner turmoil. Celine crossed her arms, her stance unwavering. Mark, I get it. Family is important. But so is your career, especially at a pivotal moment like this. The merger is set to finalize next week, and you can't just what? He cut her off sharply, his frustration bubbling to the surface. Can't just be there for my children? You might be okay with being a heartless robot, but I can't live like that anymore. There was a murmur from the crowd, startled by his outburst. Elise felt her pulse quicken as she saw the change in the air. What had felt hopeful moments before now spiraled dangerously toward conflict. Rattled by his own reaction, Mark took a deep breath. He could hear his heart thumping loudly in his ears as he locked eyes with Clara. Her expression was soft yet resolute, and Jake looked smaller than ever, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. That simple, childlike yearning for a father's presence tugged fiercely at Mark's heart. You have to find balance, Mark, Celine pressed, undeterred. We can't afford you slipping. This is your chance to secure everything you've worked for. Everything I've worked for? His voice was laced with bitterness now. That's not worth losing them, Celine. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and he could see a flicker of surprise pass across Celine's face. At that moment, Elise stepped forward again. She could feel the gravity of the situation. Mark, it's about priorities, she said softly but firmly. You have the right to choose how you want to be defined. You can be both a father and a businessman, but don't let one erase the other. Don't let fear dictate who you are. Mark, caught between two worlds, looked around the room. Faces waited with bated breath, desperate for him to break the gridlock. In this space filled with uncertainty, could he truly be the father his children needed, or was he destined to drown in the relentless rush of corporate life? He glanced again at Clara and Jake, their lives spread before him like an unwritten book. Was he willing to step away from old patterns and embrace vulnerability? His heart felt heavy, but deep down, an ember of determination flickered, urging him to make a choice that could change everything. Maybe you're right, he whispered, the admission feeling both liberating and terrifying. A wave of lightness washed over him, mingling with fear. Behind it all lurked the unknown, and part of him still craved the security of his old life. The moment stretched thin, filled with expectation. The crowd leaned in, eyes wide with hope. But just as Mark opened his mouth to articulate his decision, Celine interjected again. Think carefully, Mark, she warned in a low voice, a hint of desperation creeping into her tone. Once you choose, there's no going back. The dread gnawed at him, the truth of her warning flashing like a warning siren in his mind. Clara and Jake still stood there, waiting, their fate hinging on his next move. Would he make the decision that could either elevate his life or shatter it entirely? As Mark's breath faltered, the world felt as though it had slowed down, the weight of his choice pressing down like a lead blanket. Would he finally let go of what held him back or remain shackled to his past? Everything was about to change, but in what direction? Mark's gaze drifted back to his children, their faces melting the walls he had built around his heart. Clara's soft eyes were filled with a mix of hope and trepidation, while Jake's small hand reached out to grasp her arm, seeking reassurance. It cut through him like a knife. These were not just kids. They were his children, his everything. The crowd remained silent, the air thick with tension. In that swirling moment, Mark felt the eyes of the world on him, but all he could see were Clara's expectant eyes and Jake's trembling lips. Each heartbeat grew louder, urging him to make a choice that could redefine everything. Mark, Elise said, her voice breaking the silence like a gentle ripple. You have what it takes to be both a father and a leader. Just don't forget you're in the process. Her words sunk in deeply, tilting the balance even more toward his family. He turned back to Celine, her expression a mask of determination and fear. Celine, I can't prioritize this merger over my kids. I refuse to sacrifice moments that can't be replaced. Celine's brows knitted together, her composure slipping. But what about your ambitions? You've worked so hard for this. What kind of example do you want to set for them? It's all part of providing for your family. His anger flared again, but this time it didn't consume him, it ignited his resolve. Is it providing if I'm never present? They don't just need things, they need me. He spoke with a newfound strength, and the tremors of fear within him steadied like the resolve in his voice. Then, without warning, Clara stepped forward, her small frame suddenly taking up so much space. Daddy, please, I just want you to be here. It feels like you care more about your job than us. Her words struck harder than any criticism. It was like she debathed him in cold water, bringing clarity in the chaos. He could see his own reflection in her eyes, the pain, the longing, and it hit him. Could he live with himself knowing that his children believed he would choose work over them? He inhaled sharply, preparing himself to defy the whispers of doubt in his heart. I choose you both. I want to be the dad you deserve, one who is here, really here. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd, and a chuckle of disbelief escaped from Celine. You can't be serious, she uttered, incredulity dripping in her voice. It's time for me to find a better balance, he replied. Each syllable felt like a weight lifted, yet the gravity of what lay ahead loomed over him. What would happen next? Would he lose everything he worked for? But Mark's heart fluttered with a mix of fear and excitement. The journey wouldn't be easy, but stepping into this new light felt scarier than it had ever felt before, and he welcomed it. With a deep breath, he reached for Clara and Jake, pulling them close. Their warmth filled him with courage. I love you both more than anything, he whispered, locking eyes with each of them. They were smiling now, and their joy pushed against the tension in his chest, but just as he released the breath he had been holding, a ringing phone shattered the moment. It was the company's line, flashing on the screen with a dreaded urgency. Celine's eyes darted between him and the phone, a tension sparking back into existence. "Are you going to take it?" She pressed softly, the question hanging like a dark cloud over their embrace. Could this be the call that determined the rest of his life? Mark felt the weight reassert itself. His children still held tightly to him, their need for his presence anchored in the moment. Would he let that call shape his future once again? Or would he finally cut the ties that bound him to a job that would never love him back? The phone rang on, each chime echoing in his mind, and suddenly, everything hung in the balance. What would he choose, duty or love? Mark's fingers trembled as he stared at the phone. Each ring reverberated like a tolling bell in his chest. The anticipation hung thick in the air, a blend of anxiety and liberation, as Clara and Jake clutched his arms. Their warmth steadied him, their belief in him raw and sincere. "Don't, Daddy," Jake whispered, eyes wide with concern. "Stay with us." The innocence of his son's plea pulled at something deep within Mark. He felt the crush of responsibility while simultaneously experiencing an exhilarating sense of freedom. What good would power and status do if he lost the priceless moments with his family? He took a step back, breaking the grip of expectation from the corporate world. "I'm done chasing something that doesn't value me," he said firmly, half to himself. The realization felt like a balm soothing his restless spirit. Celine's face twisted in shock, her carefully crafted facade cracking. "Mark, you can't be serious. This is a career-defining moment." "What are you?" He cut her off. "I don't want a career that comes at the cost of my kids' happiness." The determination in his voice surprised even him. The anxiety that knotted his stomach was now replaced by a steady surge of resolve. Mark's eyes softened as he turned back to Clara and Jake. "I'm right here," he said, kneeling to their level. "I want to know you, really know you. I want to hear your laughter and see your faces light up every single day." Jake grinned, and Clara's smile enveloped him like a warm hug. The world around them faded, the crowd's murmurs dissolving into a blur. In that bubble of connection, he faced a reality he had long ignored. Their childhood was fleeting, and he was determined to cherish each moment. Celine's disbelief morphed into anger, cutting through the blissful silence. "You'll regret this, Mark. The company won't wait for you to decide to be a dad." "You're right." He breathed deeply, tasting the sweet air of relief. "But maybe it's time for me to stop living in a world governed by fear of regret and instead embrace the life I truly want." Every head in the room turned their attention to him again. Uncertainty rippled through the crowd. Mark straightened, taking a stand. "The world can keep its corporate ladder. I want to climb the one that leads me back to these two." With a final glance at the flashing phone, he reached for the power switch and flicked it off. The silence left in its wake hung heavy, but it was a welcome sound, contrasting sharply with the frantic energy of the phone. He made his choice. "Let us go home, kids," he said, adrenaline coursing through him as he stood. He felt lighter than he had in years, as if a weight had been unshackled. Just as they turned to leave, Clara spun back around, holding Jake's hand. "Wait, are we going to do that thing we talked about?" she asked, eyes shimmering with hope. "What thing?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "The picnic. In the park with the big tree and hot dogs." Her excitement was contagious. Mark chuckled. "Yes, absolutely. We'll make our own memories, as many as it takes." They started toward the exit, Mark leading them out into the sunlight, where a whole new world awaited. He felt the weight of judgment behind him. Celine stood rigid, poised to unleash a torrent of words. But Mark didn't care. He refused to let anything hold him back now. As they pushed through the doors, a new phone call buzzed in his pocket, the numbers flashing like a warning. He could feel the pull of the corporate world wanting him back. With one last glance, Mark made sure his children were beside him. "No more distractions," he whispered to himself, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. What awaited them outside could either be uncharted territory or the most beautiful adventure they'd ever known, and he was ready to face it. Unbeknownst to him, fate had one more surprise in store, a twist that would challenge everything he thought he wanted as they stepped into the brilliance of the day ahead. What if that call would change the trajectory of their lives forever, even as he set his mind to a future of love? Leaving the building, Mark took a deep breath, savoring the warm air that wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. The chatter and laughter of children playing in the park nearby floated through the air, blending perfectly with the song of the birds. It was the symphony of a life he had almost let slip away. "Look, Daddy!" Clara exclaimed, pointing toward a cluster of children racing across the grass. "They're having so much fun." Her eyes sparkled with delight, and in that moment, Mark realized that this was what truly mattered, a life filled with simple joys. "Let us do that too, sweetheart," he said, smiling at her enthusiasm. Hand in hand, they walked toward the vibrant green of the park, where freedom and laughter thrived. Jake, full of energy, darted ahead, giggling as he chased after the drifting dandelion seeds. Clara tugged at Mark's hand. "Can we have hot dogs? And chips?" She danced on her toes, bubbling with excitement. "Hot dogs it is," he replied, ruffling her hair affectionately. The thought of their picnic, his new world, warmed his heart. They found a sunny spot under the resilient branches of an old oak tree, its leaves whispering secrets in the wind. Mark spread out a checkered blanket and watched as the kids settled with carefree laughter. He felt alive, more present than he had in years. There was no boardroom waiting, no messages demanding his attention, just pure, unfiltered time with his children. As he grilled the hot dogs over a small portable grill, Mark's heart swelled with gratitude. A surge of realization struck him again. He had chosen this life. The stepping back he had done in that office had opened up a new world filled with love and laughter. "Do you think we can go to the zoo next?" Jake asked between bites, his lips smeared with ketchup. "Absolutely," Mark replied, glancing at Clara's eyes, which were brimming with excitement. "We can have a lot of adventures." "Like going to space?" Clara piped up mischievously, making her little brother giggle at the idea. "Sure. Why not? We'll build a spaceship. Just you wait." He laughed, picturing their wild imaginings pulling them into a realm of fantasy. It was liberating, but then, amidst this sweetness, Mark felt a tickle of uncertainty creep in. What if corporate life was still intertwined with his new path? The call in his pocket seemed to echo in the back of his mind, a reminder of the life he had just stepped away from. A gentle prickle of dread reminded him that he might need to face his old life again. "Can we go see the animals next weekend?" Jake's voice cut through his thoughts, full of innocence and hope. "That's a plan," Mark replied, forcing himself to smile, even as anxiety swirled around his gut. If he said yes, how easy would it be to get pulled back into that world? He fought the thought, focusing instead on the laughter of his children, the warmth of the sun, the way their faces lit up over tiny pleasures. Before he could overthink things, Clara squealed, "Don't forget to pack the juice boxes. And the cookies, Daddy." She spun around in circles, her laughter like music in the air. The image silenced Mark's racing heart. With his children's joy cascading around him, Mark decided then and there, he would protect their moments together. No matter what temptations or calls to distraction came his way, these times were precious. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the park, Mark's phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. He reached into his pocket, hesitating as Clara played with Jake, their laughter blending into the sweet sounds of a summer evening. What did this call mean? Was it about the job he had almost clung to? With a quiet sigh, he turned his phone off again, prioritizing the magic unfolding in front of him. The moments they were sharing, and the choices he'd made, these were the threads weaving his family's future. But as the evening grew darker, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling of something lingering just beneath the surface. What would happen when the demands of his past finally caught up with him? The laughter around him felt like a balm, wrapping Mark in the realization that he was finally where he needed to be. The sound of Clara and Jake's giggles lifted his spirit, drowning out the pulsing anxiety of his phone's unanswered call. He needed this. They needed this. Time was slipping through his fingers like sand, yet here, in this park, he could hold it tight. As the sun slid lower, the air thickened with a golden light. More children joined the scene, running wild as their parents shouted warnings to watch out for the bike riders. Mark looked over at his children, beaming with joy as they chased each other around the picnic blanket. He felt a grin spread across his face. It was hard not to join in the chaos. "Come on, team," he called, his voice playful. "Let us show those kids how it's done." The sound of their feet thumping the grass and their shrieks of laughter filled him with an energy he hadn't felt in a long time. They raced after each other, arms waving enthusiastically, their imaginations unbound. With a burst of determination, Mark scooped up Jake and tossed him in the air just to hear him shriek with delight. It was as if all of life's pressures melted away, replaced by this pure, unfiltered happiness. But as he caught Jake midair, his heart sank slightly. The nagging thoughts about work crept back, pushing through the joy like an unwelcome gust of wind. After their playtime, they flopped back down on the blanket, out of breath but glowing with the excitement of their small adventure. Clara leaned against Mark, her head nestled on his shoulder. "Can we do this every day, Daddy?" she asked, her voice soft and hopeful. Mark smiled, but a familiar weight settled in his chest. "I wish we could, sweet pea. But life has other plans sometimes." Jake's eyes widened. "What plans?" He felt the swell of parental instinct urging him to protect their innocent view of the world. "Well, sometimes I have to do things for my job. But I'll always make time for you too. Can't you just tell them you're busy, like always? We're more fun." Clara's tone left no room for argument, and for a fleeting moment, Mark wondered if he could just say yes. "Maybe," he replied, trying not to focus too much on the truth that hovered around like an ominous cloud. "Let us just enjoy right now, okay?" They opened the juice boxes, and Clara and Jake sipped eagerly, their eyes sparkling with delight as they munched on cookies. Life felt like a feast laid before them, and for all its troubles, this was the moment they'd remember. This was happiness. But suddenly, a voice broke through the joyful vibe, calling Mark's name in a sharp, accusatory tone. He turned to see Jonah, an old colleague, striding confidently towards him. The sight of him sent a bolt of anxiety racing through Mark's veins. "Hey, Mark. Fancy seeing you here." Jonah's voice was smooth, but edged with something he couldn't quite place, a mixture of surprise and, perhaps, judgment. Mark forced a smile, his heart pounding now. "Yeah, just spending time with the kids." Jonah's eyes flickered to Clara and Jake before settling back on Mark, the intensity of his gaze causing unease to ripple through Mark's belly. "You know, we've got an opening that you might be interested in." As Jonah spoke, Mark's mind raced. This was at the crossroads he had dreaded. Would he allow the whispers of the past to drag him back? Or would he stand firm in his newfound joy? The scene around him began to feel distant, the laughter fading behind the weight of choice placed firmly on his shoulders. What would he decide? Mark stood frozen for a split second, the warm summer breeze brushing against his skin offering no comfort. Jonah's presence was like a shadow creeping over a sunlit day, and the laughter of his children, once so vibrant, now felt like an echo, fading just out of reach. "Jonah," Mark began, his voice faltering as he searched for words. He looked to Clara and Jake, their little faces blissfully unaware of the storm threatening to engulf their time together. Pulling them close, he felt a flicker of warmth, a reminder of why he had chosen this moment and this place. "Come on, it's just a few hours. You'd have plenty of time for the kids," Jonah urged, leaning in slightly as if to reinforce his pitch. "We need someone like you, Mark. You'd be a perfect fit." Mark squinted against the bright glow of the setting sun, trying to decipher Jonah's intent behind the offer. It felt suffocating. Hadn't he left that world behind? The late nights, the pressure, the never-ending list of tasks that drained life of its joy? "But I'm happy where I am," Mark finally managed to say, the strength in his voice surprising even him. "I just need to focus on my kids right now." Jonah raised an eyebrow, his skepticism palpable. "Happy? Really?" "Mark, we both know that that's not enough." The challenge in his words felt like a dare. "You're wasting your talent. Don't you think it's time to step up again?" The word "wasting" jabbed Mark like a pin. It struck somewhere deep, where his insecurities lay hidden beneath layers of fatherhood and newfound joy. It echoed the very doubts he had tried to dismiss. Mark took a breath, forcing his heart to steady. "I'm not wasting anything," he said more firmly now. "My kids are my priority. They need me." Jake leaned against him, wrapping his tiny arms around Mark's waist. Clara mirrored the gesture on the other side, grounding him in their small universe. Just looking at them filled him with resolve. He needed to protect this bubble of happiness, even if it meant saying no to the past. Jonah scrutinized them both, then turned his gaze back to Mark, a mix of resolve and frustration etched across his face. "You think this moment will last forever, don't you?" Mark could feel the words teetering on the edge, the unspoken question about whether he would always have the luxury of time, the kind that parents often take for granted. "Let us not talk about work right now," Mark insisted, feeling a little more secure in making this stand. "I've made a choice." Jonah hesitated. The anger flickering in his eyes diminished, replaced by something like understanding. "Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me." With that, he stepped back, giving Mark a brief nod before turning to leave. Mark exhaled, the tension in his shoulders slowly melting. He watched Jonah walk away, feeling a sense of relief, yet the nagging fear remained in the back of his mind. Did he really know what he was giving up? "Daddy, who was that?" Clara asked, breaking the silence. Mark crouched, meeting her curious blue eyes. "Just someone from my old job." "Did he want you to play with him too?" Jake asked, tilting his head, brows furrowed. Mark chuckled softly, ruffling Jake's hair. "Not quite. But you know what? I think I'll stick to playing with you guys instead." As darkness began to blanket the park, the children clambered back into their fun, oblivious to the weight of the discussion that had just unfolded. Mark watched them, a bittersweet sense of peace filling him. Certainly, challenges lay ahead, but standing firm felt like a step in the right direction. But was it truly enough? As he joined his kids in a chase across the grass, that question clung to him like a shadow, persistent and unnerving. What would the future hold? Mark stood in the glowing twilight, surrounded by his children's laughter, still buzzing from his recent confrontation with Jonah. It felt liberating to stand firm, yet the whisper of doubt nagged at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the choices he made now would ripple through their future. "Come on, Jake. You can't catch me," Clara squealed, taking off with her brother pounding after her like a tiny athlete on a mission. The joy radiating from them was contagious, and for a moment, Mark allowed himself to lose the worries that loomed. He watched them weave in and out of trees, their giggles echoing in the dusk. Each smile they shared reminded him of why he had chosen love over ambition. But as shadows lengthened, he felt fragments of his old life creeping back into thoughts, like whispers that turned into shouts. At the pit of his stomach, he grappled with uncertainty. Could he truly balance this untamed joy with the demands of his fast-paced life? Was he ready to confront those challenges together? "Let us eat," he called, waving the promise of dinner like a flag. Clara and Jake skidded to a halt, their faces lighting up like fireworks. He had packed those hot dogs and sodas earlier, thrilling at the thought of unseen memories cooking in the flame of the grill. Sitting beneath the oak tree, laughter filling the air, Mark felt the warmth of happiness wash over him. They tore into their picnic feast, and in between bites, Mark couldn't help but relish how his children flourished in this moment. It was a scene that made the chaos of the previous weeks feel like an entirely different world. "You know, Daddy," Jake began between mouthfuls, "that guy was kinda mean. I don't want you to leave us." It was a simple observation, but it hit hard. Mark paused, letting Jake's words sink in. "You're the best part of my life, buddy. I wouldn't leave you for anything." He meant it. The promises he made to himself were crystal clear now. Clara chimed in, her curiosity piqued. "So you're staying forever, right?" The glimmer in her eyes made Mark's heart swell with love. "Forever is a long time," he replied, glancing across the park at families unpacking, children playing, and couples laughing together. "But I can promise you this. I'll be here as much as I can. Even if you take calls, you can jump back and forth like a superhero," Clara suggested, her imagination buzzing wildly. No calls. Just us, Mark insisted gently but firmly. I'm done with that life, deciding my happiness. Suddenly, as if on cue, his phone buzzed wildly in his pocket, a reminder from the unseen world he was trying to leave behind. For a heartbeat, he felt the pulse of tension return, but he quickly silenced it, focusing on the faces that truly mattered. Let us finish eating, then we can find something fun to do, Mark declared, feeling the weight lift from his chest. Their hot dogs vanished quickly, replaced by cookie crumbs that scattered like dreams yet to be realized. With their bellies full, he suggested a game of tag, and the playground erupted with youthful energy. They rushed around until they were breathless, arms outstretched, laughter bursting like bubble wrap behind them. That was so fun, Clara announced, plopping down on the soft grass, Jake beside her. As they caught their breath, Mark looked at his children, feeling hope unfurl within him like spring flowers. Can we do this every Sunday? Jake asked, earnestness shining from his bright eyes. Absolutely, Mark promised, filled with warmth. This can be our thing, no distractions, just us. As twilight deepened into night, the stars peeked through the clouds, twinkling over them, and Mark felt a sense of belonging wrap around him like a cozy blanket. The shadows of his past faded with every laugh, every shared moment. In that instant, he knew life would always throw challenges his way, but love was the anchor that kept him grounded. It was time to prioritize the precious moments, the ones that could slip away if he wasn't too careful. Mark looked over at Clara and Jake, innocence glowing on their faces. Here was his transformation. Family wasn't just a title, it was a choice, a promise, and he had the power to forge the path ahead free of invisible chains. And when his phone buzzed once more, he made his final decision. Sensing the pull of corporate demands waning, he switched it off for good. In the frame of that evening, surrounded by laughter and love, Mark breathed deeply, finally ready to embrace this new chapter, one that belonged solely to him and his children. Let us get ice cream on the way home, he exclaimed, joy bubbling in his heart. Yes, Clara and Jake cheered as they jumped to their feet, ready to chase the sweetness of life together. As they walked off into the night, Mark realized that he would always face uncertainties, but the journey he had chosen was worth every step. They disappeared into the horizon, under the stars, ready for whatever came next. This is the moment of transformation. Life is fragile and precious. Let love shine the brightest. And you, dear reader, if you felt that surge of inspiration, if you believe in this transformation and the importance of prioritizing family and love, you need to subscribe now to our channel. Don't wait not even one more second. Hit that like button so we can spread this heartwarming journey far and wide. We want to hear your reactions and feelings in the comments. Let us fuel this community with love. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need this message. Together, we can remind everyone that love is the most powerful force, and it starts with just one simple action.